because of the way this society is organized, because of the violence that exists on the surface everywhere, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions. You have to expect things like that as reactions.
How ignorant do we have to be to ask questions like that?
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that I'm above that ignorance. Like, I would definitely ask similar things without first having been opened up to this type of thing, which we weren't opened up to in school. What the hell? Welcome back, friends, family, and strangers who are soon to be family, to another episode of Learn With Us,
where we find video content that's worth your time.
and we learn from it.
With you.
Today, we are learning from Angela Davis. I hadn't seen much about her in my life. I'd heard the name, seen her face.
Yes, same.
But due to our great education system, we are often not shown people like this. But due to my current actual great education system, I'm in a class with one of my professors who studies gender and race in a whole lot of depth, and she's opened my eyes to a lot of really cool stuff.
That's awesome.
Including a film called The 13th. Actually,
Yes.
That wasn't necessarily through class, but same things happening, just sparking interest in that type of stuff.
Yeah.
The 13th is a film about our current constitution and how it is still enforcing various forms of slavery
Through the prison system.
through the prison system.
And we both watched it together, saw her in it, and we were like, this is a really cool lady.
Yeah.
We would love to react to her. So
So we're reacting to some
Yeah.
of her old school stuff. I think this is from either the late 60s or early 70s or something like that. But
Okay.
it's her about violence and revolution.
dang, I'm excited.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but the question is more, how do you get there? Do you get there by confrontation, violence?
Oh, is that the question you were asking?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for, not in the way you reach them. On the other hand, because of the way this society is organized, because of the violence that exists on the surface everywhere, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions. You have to expect things like that as reactions. If you are a black person and live in the black community all your life and walk out on the street every day seeing white policemen surrounding you, when I was living in Los Angeles, for instance, long before the situation in LA ever occurred, I was constantly stopped. No, the police didn't know who I was, but I was a black woman, and I had a natural, and they, I suppose, thought that I might be a, quote, militant. And when you live under a situation like that constantly, and then you ask me, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
This is one of the problems that, I personally have been the problem with this type of thing, and only through this type of learning have I figured out different ways of approaching it, but
Yes.
that when we see someone who is searching for any sort of like revolution or pointing out injustices, we are often targeting the questions towards them of like why is there violence happening in this revolution? Like why this is causing more violence or stuff like that. And Angela Davis here is just holding up a mirror and going like, look, it's not the fact that black people want the same freedom as white people that is causing violence. It's the fact that we have a violence-based society that when we're trying to move towards a more equal way of living, that violence has to break out in order to do that, that it takes violence to create change. That's because we pride ourselves on the wars in our history.
Exactly. That's how much time, if you had mapped out what you would learn in history class, was spent on learning about wars and more specifically the victors of those wars.
Yeah.
So we are very much a violence-centric society. That is what is sensationalized in our media. It's what we see all the time in our budgetary spending. And we also need to expand the idea of what violence is. Violence is not just the physical violence. The physical violence is what comes up on the surface, and it's what you might see in a revolution. But the physical violence comes from all of these institutional violences that happen underneath. These emotional violences put against people who are treated as though they're lesser. Emotional violence and psychological and spiritual violence can often be even worse than the physical violence and can lead to greater physical violence, but that's, yeah.
It makes you think about the suicide epidemic right now. And it's like,
yes,
a kid, a 13-year-old kid in my town, in my hometown, took their life, like, I think it was 3-4 weeks ago, something like that. And it's just like, what? It's a well-off town, you know, like a really good support system in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Actually, not a really good support system, because you then see things like this happen, and it's like a kid isn't going to decide that it's a good idea to take their own life unless they are experiencing a world that is not worth living in.
And do you think that that kid experienced great amounts of physical violence?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
probably not.
Probably not. It was probably more likely intense emotional and psychological violence that was happening to this kid. Even if it wasn't, even say he wasn't bullied. Because that's what you would think of. That's the first thing that you would think of. And that is definitely a huge issue. Maybe the violence was just a lack of love and connection. Maybe this kid just felt disconnected, which I feel like is just as violent as anything else, because it is completely turning away from what it means to be human.
If you don't have connection, then you're always going to be clawing for connection.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly.
Dang, that took us on a ride.
Yeah, it did.
But just, I love that idea of, in all of this work, we need to stop with the, you know, it's very easy to question that person or that movement and be like, what's wrong with this movement?
Yes.
And I think it is only fair to ask a question of someone else if you've asked it of yourself.
And also, another thing that she was saying is that what a movement or revolution should be judged on is not the things happening, it's the principles that lead the things. And the principles, so this guy
and that's
seems
the
like,
content of the revolution.
Yes, this interviewer seems like he's asking these surface questions, and she's like, no, you need to lean back here and let's talk about the principles of this revolution. Let's talk about, because this is what's important. Yeah. Oh, man.
Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists. I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed. After the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? we heard about the bombing, and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. Because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
Man. And then you think about what's happening today. However, 60 years later, same stuff. Violences happening against black folk, then the revolutionary uprisings, and then people are pointing fingers at that, as that, like, oh, this was a terrible thing, but hey, but they shouldn't be reacting in this way. That is, I feel like that's still the narrative that we're being told.
I mean, I think just that idea of her community having to, like, first of all, the whole concept of her father always needing a gun nearby, because at any point their lives could be threatened, and then asking that person, oh, are you for or against guns? And they're like, oh, my family needed a gun. It's not, am I for or against it? Like, do you think that those people do you think any person wants to be sleeping at night with a weapon in arm's reach? In case they would hear someone kick down the door? Like, how ignorant do we have to be to ask questions like that? But I'm not saying that I'm above that ignorance. Like, I would definitely ask similar things without first having been opened up to this type of thing, which we weren't opened up to in school. What the hell?
Well, because the school is part of the rest of the system that's doing the suppression, and so it's just reinforcing everything.
And it's not even like the teachers or those people are like bad people, because they have to teach a certain curriculum.
Well, it's the system.
Exactly. And it's like, but it's just this point where all we are gonna keep doing, and I have a poem about this a while ago on this channel called Revolution versus Evolution, is that the idea of these like revolutions are often cyclical, and the fact that you don't actually go anywhere. And I'm not saying like that's a kind of a different look at revolution than what she is talking about, but we have this like idea of revolution that it's going to be like violent and intense, or that it's scary and things like that. And with that type of a mindset about revolution, we are going to reinforce cycles back to where we are. Like, these protests were happening in the 60s and 70s and are still happening today. We clearly have not taken a step, even though we've had so many genius revolutionaries
like Angela Davis.
And it's like, how do we release ourselves from this cycle that we keep coming back to, and instead start changing this overall narrative? Because it's just the way that we're looking at the problem that's going to keep us in these revolutions.
Because you can't look at it too closely. Kind of like what she was saying. You really need to zoom out. What this made me think of was, you can be focused on all these specifics. Was it right? Was it wrong? Was it right? Was it wrong? And I think we get too caught up in these little conversations. Was it right? Was it wrong? Was it right? Was it wrong? And what we need to do is zoom way out and say, what's going on in these communities? Don't place blame anywhere. what's going on in these communities is so far away from human nature, from what it means to be human, from what it means to have a strong community, those base layer things that we need as people.
White and black communities alike in different like situations.
Exactly. That's all that matters. Is that there is so much distance from our nature as humans and what is being shown, what's happening.
And people like these revolutionaries like James Baldwin wrote and spoke about this exact topic. Like, said those same words. I definitely want to react to him soon because he's got some amazing stuff. But again, it shows that we're back at the same place, having the same... People had these ideas 60, hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
You know? But it makes me think, one analogy I heard for this that you can share with your friends is, I told you this already, but the birdcage analogy.
Oh,
I forget who the feminist writer was that I was reading, but she was talking about how oppression works.
Yes, this is brilliant.
Yeah. And we often think about, like, so imagine a bird cage and there's a bird in a cage that can't get out. This is an oppressed bird because it is limited in what it can do.
Cannot fly.
That is oppression. Yes. You cannot go where you want to go.
Yes. Which we can think of as these are all the elements of human nature in a state that is loving and peaceful. And
Is that freedom, but you are caged.
Yes.
And that when we talk about these issues, we are often looking at a single wire of the cage. And when we look at an issue like violence, you know, you can easily point out, looking at this wire, you can be like, violence is bad. There's a lot of violence in these black communities. Like, why is there those violence? And you can ask all these questions. And if you look at just that one wire, you know, you're like, well, of course a bird could just fly around a wire in either way, man. You know? Like, that's just one little thing that we could figure out, and just don't use guns. And then it's like, but what oppression really is an entire cage of issues.
And we're too zoomed in on this one
and
issue.
we're intellectually discussing one issue.
Yes.
Rather than looking at what a whole human life is and understanding that all of those different issues create a cage together.
That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
That I don't want to have a gun, but I don't have a choice not to have a gun because I'm in this cage. You know?
Damn.
And it's like, let's take that step back that she's talking about.
Yes.
And this writer said exactly that. She's like, we need to remove the magnifying glass. We need to create that space, as Angela Davis is saying.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to know it's a cage unless you see the full cage, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Those
are some... I don't even know what they are.
Yeah, just really good thinkers. Good thinkers who actually know how we can move forward.
Yeah.
It's like
time to like learn from them and not get back into this 60 years from now.
And if you want more content like that, where we're learning from thinkers like this, you should give this channel a subscribe. Let us know down below who you would like us to hear from or listen to, learn from with you.
Okay.
I hope you're all well. That was a lot on the shoulders, so make sure to decompress a bit after this.
Watch our Muji reaction.
Exactly, yes.
for a lighter feel.
Yes.
Jeez.
All right,
Much
man.
love.
Much love.